get started.
Super welcome and hello, beady friends. I am Meredith from Beadalon and Artistic Wire. Apologies for having to reschedule last week's class. I was a little under the weather. And I had been very under the weather for a couple of weeks, and you can kind of hear it a little bit in my voice still, but I think we're going to be great for class today. If you are joining me live, welcome. It's great to have you here and great to be here live. As always, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if there's something about the class today that I was a little unclear of, just go ahead and put that in the comments. I have the comments up and ready to scroll through to catch my eye if there's anything that needs a little bit of clarification. If you're joining us on the replay, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, as you know, live or on the replay, all of these classes are available in the Michael's Community Classroom section of their YouTube channel, along with, I almost said dozens, but now it's got to be hundreds, maybe even thousands, I don't know, at least hundreds of amazing classes from all different kinds of crafters and makers, covering every craft, every creative pursuit that you would ever want to pursue. So again, I'm Meredith from Beadalon, and today we are going to be making this ladder stitched bracelet. I'm going to go over all of the materials and all of the instructions that we need as soon as we take that other camera. But if you are a novice beader, if you are a seasoned veteran stringer, hopefully there'll be something in this class that you can take away. So I think we're ready to go ahead, Rich, and take that other camera. You will all notice that we are a lot closer today than we have been. I am playing around with a different camera. I went back to an iPhone 12 from my 15 upgrade that I thought was going to be so great. And I think we are going to be able to get that focus so close and so tight today. I'm really, really excited about that. Go ahead and let me know in the comments if things are a little fuzzy or if they're clearer than ever. It would really help me kind of know what I need to continue to tweak to make sure that our classes are the best that they can be. So let me give you a nice close-up of what we're doing today. Really, this is a trick project because it is a basic stringing project, but it's basic stringing, but with a little bit of a next level. So in all of our Michael's classes, we learn all kinds of different tips and tricks as we are on our jewelry making journey. But the thing that I love is even the basics can be tweaked a little bit for a really interesting and unique design. The other thing I love about this design is that it highlights the wire. The wire I used here for this design is a 19 strand 0.018 silver color wire. And silver color wire is one of my absolute favorite wires to work with, whether I am doing a design like this where I am showcasing the wire, or even if I am hiding that wire behind beads. Because as you can see from these translucent green beads, if the bead is translucent, that means it's clear. It has some abilities to be seen through. The silver color and also the gold color just makes those beads shine from within. And if you've been following along, you know me, you know that I use silver color and gold color wire in almost all of the designing and the beading that I do. Although today, I will say I'm going to be using for this project a bright wire. I'm still using that 0.018 diameter, but I thought that the bright wire would show up a little bit better. Now that I'm looking at it and I have the colors or the camera all set up so close. I love how close this is. It's making me so happy. I probably could have gotten away with using that silver color wire, but when I do classes, especially when I'm doing when I'm doing stitching classes, I always like to use a little bit of a darker material. I just think it shows up a little bit better as we're learning. So very simple project today. We're going to be doing some crimping. We're going to cover our crimps with crimp covers, and we're going to learn a ladder stitch. Now, a ladder stitch is what this is, and you'll see as I'm doing it, I'm using actually 2 pieces of wire and I'm crisscrossing them in these beads. And once you get the stitch, which is pretty easy, and just with a little bit of repetition through this project, you'll have it by the end, is the basis for a lot of other stitches. If you have been thinking about dabbling in some bead stitching, perhaps something that's called a right angle weave, this is really the fundamental building block of a right angle weave. So all of the things that we do in our jewelry making classes are really creating the skills to build and to learn how to do much more complex things. But it all starts with the fundamentals, and fundamentals like crimping, like we're going to be doing today. Again, I'm Meredith from Beadalon. Beadalon is the manufacturer, just in case this is your first time with me in class. We manufacture this wire and we make it right in the USA, down the road from where I sit right now in Valley Township or Coatesville, Pennsylvania. So pretty darn cool that we are an American manufacturer of this great wire that we're going to be using for class today. And thank you so much for my people joining me live who are chiming in that the quality looks good. Love to know also, is this your first class with me, or are you a seasoned pro? I see a couple of familiar names here, but there are some new people as well. So if this is your first time taking class with me, welcome. It is great to have you here. So I think we're just going to get right into it. Basics of beading. For our supplies right now, we're going to need our beading wire, crimp tubes, crimp covers, a clasp, right? And then the tools that we need are going to be a cutter and a crimping plier. For those of my new students, you will learn that you always want to crimp your crimp beads with a crimping plier. We're not going to be smashing those beads flat. I love it. We've got a couple of first classes and some repeat offenders as well. Well, welcome to everyone. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna pull off a little bit of wire and we are going to cut it. So our first step, as the instructions that were emailed with your class or can be found down below underneath the video, we're going to cut two 16-inch lengths of beading wire. So I am just kind of eyeballing these lengths, but 16 inches is a good place to start. So I'm going to cut one, just using a nice cutter that will cut this wire nice and crisply. It is, won't be the first time you hear me say it in class. It is so nice to be able to get the camera down so very close and really see what's going on here. I'm a little bit not used to working with such a small distance, but I'm certainly not complaining. I'm very, very happy about this. Okay, so what we're going to do with these two lengths, I'm also going to grab, I just have a kind of a little storage container here that I have all of my my supplies in. I'm going to bring out 1/2 of my clasp, but I'm just using a simple lobster claw and a tag for my clasp. That's kind of my go-to for what I like to use. You could use a toggle, you could use a super fancy clasp adorned with lots of different crystals. It's really up to you. And what I like to do, it's my little pro tip, I like to, especially if I'm using a clasp like this, I just keep it clasped. That way I make sure I don't lose half of my clasp. I don't know about you, but I have definitely been one to lose part of my clasp. And the one thing that I didn't grab before I sat down was something that we need for our class today, which is a number 3 crimp tube. Now, why a number 3 crimp tube? So up here we go. The reason why we're using a number 3 crimp tube, even though our wire calls for a number 2 crimp tube, is that I'm actually going to be going through that crimp tube with 4 strands of wire. So if you go back and you watch the video that I always recommend, which is the 5 things you should never do while making beaded jewelry, that's in the Michael's YouTube channel. I go through the label here. We talk all about diameter, we talk about crimping, we talk about tubes and beads and what it all means. If all of the words that I'm using, you're like, oh, I'm Meredith, I know exactly what you're talking about. Fantastic. But if you need a little bit of a refresher, I always recommend going back and watching that video. It's called The 5 Things You Should Never Do While Making Beaded Jewelry. And it will teach you everything from top to bottom that you need to know about making sure that you're constructing the jewelry the best that you can. But I'm using a number 3 crimp tube. And the reason why I'm using that is because I'm going through my crimp tube with 2 wires. Okay. If I was just going through once with 1 wire, of course, I would use a number 2 crimp tube. But the number 3 is just that little bit larger to give the right amount of space. So I'm just going to tap one out. And the crimp tubes, you can find these crimp tubes from Beadalon at michaels.com on the online ordering, but they also have in store great variety packs that have all of the different sizes that you need. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking 2 of those wires together, and I'm going to take 2 of those wires together, and I'm going to thread them through that crimp tube. I'm also going to notice how excited I am about that focal depth. I'm sorry, I'm not going to stop talking about it. I'm so excited. And then I'm going to put both of those wires through my clasp. And it doesn't really matter which one you start with. I tend to generally use the smaller part. I'm going through my tag here. I would love to know in the comments, if you're putting a clasp on, which side, if any, do you usually go through first? Do you usually go through the lobster claw side? Do you usually go through the larger part of your toggle bar? It's just kind of always something that I've done. I've always go for the smaller of the size. I'm not sure it matters. It might. But that is what I do. So now what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that these guys are even, first of all, so that they look nice. I'm also making sure that my wires are not crossed in that crimp tube. And I'm also, oh, thank you so much for posting that link, Rich. I really appreciate it. I'm also making sure that I have enough wiggle room here. I don't want that loop to be so tight so that there's unjust and undue pressure and tension on my clasp. I just want it to be about 1/8 of an inch. And if I need to give myself a little bit more slack here with my tails, I can do that. And then we're going to crimp. We're going to use our crimping pliers. And you can see, oh, you can see so close now. I'm so happy. The crimping pliers has a front part of the jaw and a back part of the jaw. And I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to first squeeze with the front part of the jaw, then squeeze with the back part of the jaw, and then squeeze with the front part of the jaw again. So let's do that. Front part of the jaw. And that puts it into a little oval. Then I'm going to come to the back part of the jaw, and I'm going to make a taco or a crescent. And then you can see I'm kind of chomping up and down to make sure that everything is as it should be. And then I'm going to come vertically in that front part of the jaw again and turn my taco into a burrito. And again, I'm going to come around and around and around and just round that crimp out and give a little tug to make sure everything took and call it done. Oh my gosh, okay. So then what I want to do is I am going to trim these little guys off as close to the crimp as I can. You might need to do one at a time. That's okay. I tend to be able to get them both together. You just want to make sure that you get the little ends and not the big ends, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put on a crimp cover. I've been using crimp covers a lot recently. I kind of go through phases with crimp covers. And what crimp covers are these little Pac-Man looking guys. And they go over your crimp to make it look like a bead. So it's the difference between having a crimp tube here on the end or a crimp cover. Now, crimp covers can hide a multitude of sins, but they can also be a little fiddly. So in order to get them on, you can see I just kind of placed it over my crimp like that. Sometimes they're a little fiddlier than other times. You might have to, it might fall a couple times. You might need to kind of finagle it on there. And this is the age-old debate, right? We always talk about this on our classes, whether or not we're going to close our crimp covers using chain nose pliers or using a mighty crimping plier. So I grabbed my my bent chain nose pliers, but I'll just go ahead and grab my regular old chain nose pliers for this. Doesn't really matter, but I know that many more people have a regular chain nose plier than a bent chain nose plier. Although I will say, if you don't have a bent chain nose plier, it is one of my all-time favorite tools. But that's a different class for a different day. All right, so I'm just very gently, in very small incremental movements, squeezing these ends of the crimp cover together until they are nice and closed. And if I did have a mighty crimping plier, which I still don't down here in the studio, but if I did have a mighty crimping plier, I could use that smooth outer jaw to accomplish the same goal. I don't know. I find I have just a little bit more control when I'm using the chain nose pliers, but you do what you do. Sandra says she usually does the lobster claw first. Yeah, I don't think it really matters. It's just one of those things that I've noticed, especially in teaching classes, that's something that I do. All right, so now we get to our beads. So for my sample bracelet, because it is the holiday season, I used some red and green beads that I actually had left over from another project. And then I realized that I actually had an extra strand of those beads. So in case anybody is curious, this is the part number for those beads. But the red beads are still left over from that other project. But the best part about this project, and the thing that I love about it, is you could literally use any beads. You could use size 6 seed beads if you wanted to. You could use crystals. You could use gemstones. You could use square beads. That would be a really, really cool use of shape in this project. Oh my gosh, I can't even think of something that wouldn't work with a little cajoling and a little fit angling to make this design work. So bead soup, leftover beads. You could even do it in an array of sizes and shapes. Okay, so sky is the limit for this project for using up beads. Jennifer, that's great to hear. I'm so pleased. So pleased that I finally, after all of these months, have been able to get my focus nice and close again. All right, so we're going to start here. Let's see. So I started on the instructions with the green bead. So we'll start with the instructions with the green bead too, just to keep it consistent. Again, does not really matter. And what we're going to do is we are going to work with two wires at once, one in one hand and one in the other hand. So my bead is going to go on one wire. I think I favor putting it on the left side first. Again, does not matter one bit, because what we're going to do is with that other wire, we're going to cross it. So in my bead, I have one wire heading off to the right and one wire heading off to the left. And I'm just going to pull this down and tighten it up. You could also, this could be a necklace, it could be an anklet. If you did this technique with, you could do like size 8 seed beads, maybe even size 11s if you were feeling really frisky, and make it into a ring. Just so many different possibilities for using this technique. So I have tightened that up, and I want to make sure that it's pretty even. Millimeters are not going to matter because eventually the wire is going to kind of work itself out and everything will even itself out in the end. But next step, just added my green bead. I'm going to add my red bead. And these beads are actually not exactly the same shape. The green beads are much flatter and the red beads are a true round faceted bead. So varying different textures, different shapes, and different sizes is just going to yield better and different and more fun results. So tighten that up. And I don't necessarily need for it to be super, super tight against that next bead for two reasons. First of all, it's going to continue to bump out. It's not going to want to stay real tight against that bead. But also because of the way that the design is, I would like it to be a little looser. I would like that wire to be more of a star of the show. One of the things that we really pride ourselves at Beadalon, or pride ourselves with at Beadalon, is letting the wire be the star and take center stage. And most often when we're making jewelry, the wire kind of fades into the background, right? It's utilitarian. But because we make the wire, and we're so proud of the wire that we make at Beadalon, we like to give it the center stage, as it were. And now I'm realizing that using the gray to demonstrate with rather than the white, especially on this blue background, is actually the wrong decision because it's kind of fading back. I thought it was going to pop a little bit more, but that silver is really the one that's popping. Oh well, you know where we were going and what I was doing. All right, so let's keep going. I'm going to add a red one here. And see, I generally do put I tend to put it on the left first, but again, it does not matter. And I'm going to cross back through here over the other side. So one is coming to the right and one is coming to the left. And I'm going to tighten it up. And you could see while I was kind of chatting about the wire, I'm just giving a little zhuzh to all of these. I'm kind of tightening them. I'm moving them around to make sure that everything is working and lining up the way it should. Patty has a great question, and I'm really glad that she asked it. She said, is it okay if I use something to tack my project down? I think that is a great idea. If you wanted to put a little pin here, I'm trying to see if I have a needle that I could use in a pinch as a pin, but I don't see any at my fingertips. You could use like a T-pin here. You could, even if you weren't working on a bead mat, if you were working on a table, you just slip a little piece of tape if that's easier for you. Or as we're, excuse me, as I'm brainstorming, we could use a clipboard, kind of in the macrame sense of having things tacked down as we are working with them. I don't mind so much this guy moving around, but if it's a problem for you, if it's giving you a little more agita and a little less joy than you're searching for in a beading project, absolutely, yeah, I think that's a great idea and a really good helpful tip for somebody else who might be struggling as well. I do still have that frog in my throat, and I apologize. When we rescheduled class, I tried to do it both with optimism that I'd be feeling better by today, but I also didn't want to let too much time go in between when class was supposed to be scheduled last week. So as I'm going along, and we're repeating ourselves, we're going to do just the same thing over and over again. Before we get to finishing, I'm going to do a couple more. I might not finish the whole bracelet, but we're going to do a couple more here. But what I'm going to do, if you'll indulge me, is use our time together as a focus group. And of course, if you are watching on the replay, your opinion is very important as well. I don't believe comments are turned on for Michael's for the videos. Maybe they are, but you can always send an email to the Michael's friends, or even me at Beadalon. The email to reach General Beadalon is sales@Beadalon, and let me know, or let our Michael's friends know, what you'd be really excited for a jewelry making class in the upcoming year. We're in the planning phases now for how we're starting off the beginning of 2025, and I always know what I like to teach and what I like to talk about in my favorite beading techniques and tips and tricks and classes. But I love knowing from students, both new, you know, people who are brand new to taking classes with me, or if you've been along for the ride. Gosh, how long have we been doing this now? Almost 4 years, over 4 years. It's been quite a wonderful experience. And as always, huge thank yous and shout outs to the Michaels team who puts these videos together and who does all of the organizing behind the scenes and the planning and the prepping and the, oh my gosh, lots and lots of work. It goes through both, or goes into both pre and post production on these videos. And it's wonderful to have you joining us both live and on the replay for learning and making. Mia has a great idea. She says, wire jewelry, crocheting with beads. All right, so I'm going to drill down on that a little bit. So you're saying crocheting with beads. Are you talking about crocheting with yarn with beads? Are you talking about crocheting with like supple max, which, oh, I wish I had that necklace down here. I have one up in my office. One of my favorite projects that I've done is crocheting with supple max with beads. I definitely recommend going back on the YouTubes and checking that one out. Actually, because this gray is blending in, I'm just going to move my tray out of the way. I'm going to bring my beads a little bit closer, but I'm going to move my tray out of the way. So we're working on the white background so we can see a little bit better what's going on. I think that is the solution to that problem. Okay, so we're going to do a little wire crochet with beads. I love that idea. I will put that on the course schedule for the upcoming year. Really, really fun. To kind of, I'm already being derailed with brainstorming some different thoughts and ideas. Jennifer has a great thought. She said would be so pretty with just AB beads, especially with the shiny wire. I think AB beads should just always be used in almost every situation. I love an AB finish. Especially, you know, when we're talking crystals and sometimes old school crystals. So this will happen. So I did 2 reds in a row, right? I think I'd like to keep my pattern. Sometimes when that happens, I treat it like a happy little accident, right? And I'll leave that in there. But I think I want to keep keep with my pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and back that out. One of the things to be aware of with wire is it is wire, right? And so it's designed not to kink and to be very, very supple and drapey, but you do want to treat it with care because at the very basic construction, it is wire. And even though these wires are very, very fine and they are designed to resist kinking, they still are wire. And so if you give this a tough treatment, especially if you somehow pull it against a bead, think of it as you're doing the same thing as pulling a scissors against ribbon, like present ribbon. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to kink up. I'm sorry, it's going to spiral up, and we don't want that. We want our wire to be nice and supple and nice and smooth. So just exactly, Jennifer, curling ribbon. You want to make sure that when you're working with wire, especially if you need to take something out, you saw I could do it. It wasn't a problem. You just want to be aware of its limitation. Just like any material that you're using. If you were working with clay, you want to make sure that you don't leave it out overnight to dry out. If you're working with food crafts, you want to make sure that they're at the right temperature. All different considerations that you need to just be aware of as you're working with wire. You could also do this. So we've been talking about lots of different beads that you could use in this technique. But speaking of wire, right? We're speaking of wire, doing our wire crochet. You could also do this with artistic wire. I have a spool of color craft here. Oh, here we go. So but this is the wire that I'm referring to when I talk about artistic wire. It would be a little more, you just have to be a little bit more careful with it because of the properties and the way that particular wire works. This is wire for wire working, right? This is wire for making shapes, making clasps, making loops, linking things together. I keep doing double reds. But you could do this technique with that wire and do some really, really interesting things with that as well. All right, let's see. Oh, I've got a ways to go. I think I'm going to do maybe 2 more just to show everybody the pattern, and then we're going to go ahead and finish this guy off. I think we've got it by now, right? We've got one here on the left. We're crossing through with the right, and then we're going to pull it tight. And depending on your sensibilities, you will either want to finish with a green bead or finish with a red bead. So my sensibilities say finish with a green bead because it holds the pattern symmetrically in my brain. Your brain might need it to finish with a red bead because then each one is has the same even amount of beads. I'll leave that up to you and your subconscious, your psyche to know which one you need to use. I also really like how the beads, the green beads, are what is the word I'm looking for? It's escaping me right now, but they're different colors. So it goes from light to dark. Gradiated? No. There's a word. I'm sure someone's going to put it in the comments for me right away. See, you can tell I'm still a little under the weather. My descriptive words aren't quite there. So what we're going to do, and Patty, I'm going to get to your question in just a second, is repeat those steps that we did on the other end. So I'm going to keep going. Mine's a little short, but we get the basic gist. So depending on whether or not we want to do a necklace, maybe we want to do a choker that's 15.5 inches. You want to do a bracelet that's about 7 inches. Maybe you want to do an anklet that's an anklet, maybe like 9.5, 10 inches, whatever it is for you that's going to be right. I tend to take another bracelet that's similar and measure it against it. Whenever you do get to that length, you're going to want to go ahead and repeat those steps that you did on the other side. So I'm going to come and put that number 3 crimp tube over those 2 wires one more time. Patty's saying, how about a class on how to attach findings to chains and other pre-made pieces and how to create findings as well? That's definitely 2 separate classes. But 2 great class ideas. I really, really like those as well. Especially because Michaels has so many kind of almost ready to make jewelry. I'm sorry, almost ready to make findings and pieces and parts in the jewelry aisle. So a class to show how to put all of those things together is a great idea. And then how to create findings, that is a fabulous idea. I really like that. We could do ear wires and clasps and head pins, and what else could we do? Jump rings. Oh my gosh, yes, that is, I'm going to put that on the early side. I really like that idea because we have not done a class that's just solely, I don't think, on creating findings. It's kind of been in a number of different places. But what I've done now is I've strung my wire back through my clasp, and I'm going to come back down through that number 3 crimp tube. And again, I'm using a number 3 crimp tube because I am sliding not 2, but 4 wires through it. So you need a crimp tube that's going to be a little bit bigger, that's going to allow for all of that space. So now I'm going to shore all of this up. And I want to make sure that I'm not tightening it up too much. I want to make sure that all of this wire that I have crisscrossed over here has enough room to move and breathe. I'm kind of rubbing my fingers around, making sure that my spacing is right. Also making sure that my spacing here at the top is nice. I want to mirror that about 1/8 of an inch of a loop right here, and mirror that space, that triangle above that bead as well. Now, just for funsies, I'm just going to see how close I can get. I'm so excited to have the new old phone back that I'm really now I'm just getting silly with how close I'm going to try to get this in here. But I'm going to come in here again with the front part of my crimping pliers and press that down into an oval. Then I'm going to come back to the back part of my crimping pliers. And very carefully, you can see I'm taking my time. I also want to make sure you guys can see what's happening. I'm pressing that down to make my taco, or my half moon, my crescent moon, or my jelly bean. And then I'm going to come here back to the front of my crimping plier, where I'm going up and down and pressing round and around and around to make that crimp nice and burrito-like. I'm not smushing it down, because if you smush that crimp down, what you're doing is actually breaking the wires. So oftentimes when people, actually, I'm so close, I need to give myself a little bit more room to work. Oftentimes when people have their pieces break, especially right here at the crimp, it's because they've actually crushed their wire and broken it, or put too much tension on their wire. So again, in that 5 things class that I reference often, there are a lot of things to be aware of and to be cognizant of as you are doing your crimping. Now see, this one's a little fiddlier. That first crimp cover went on a lot easier, but this one you just kind of have to work with it and push it on so that the crimp cover goes over that crimp bead or crimp tube. And again, crimp covers are not necessary. I just like sometimes how they look, especially in a design like this, where there is a lot of exposed wire. It is very airy. There are a lot of silver spots, especially on this one where I use the silver wire. And so it's nice to be able to use a crimp cover to highlight a little bit more design. I'm going to see if I can actually put this on. Sometimes I can get a lobster claw on my wrist myself. Let's see if I can do it under the gun. There we go. It's a little big, the one that was my sample, but this would actually be perfect for my mom because she really likes a very loose bangle. And then obviously the one that I made today is more of a kid's size because we were doing it for class. We didn't need to do the whole thing soup to nuts, because we got the gist, because it's a very repetitive design that teaches the basics of bead stringing, right? Our crimping and covering a crimp tube with a crimp cover. But also a little bit of an extra twist, a little bit of a ladder stitch to start building on the basics of bead stringing and think about doing some different designs as well. So Rich, I think we are done with class today. This has been a great one with a very close up, which I am so pleased about. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me today. If you're joining me on the replay, thanks for watching as well. Don't forget, if you do make this project, go ahead and post it on your socials and use the following hashtags. Let's see if I can remember them all. We got Make It with Michaels. We have Let's do Make It with Beadalon. You can tag me. I'm at Meredith Joy Designs. We also want to do, oh my gosh, Rich, what are the other Michael's hashtags? It's Make It with Michaels, learn with Michaels,
Michaels.
learn with Michaels. And then I always used to do Michael's community classroom. So just tag them all. Make sure you tag Michael's in there, and then they'll be happy and give you a like and a retag. Here we go. Michael's classes, Make It with Michaels, and Learn with Michaels. All right, I'm gonna have to put those on a little sticky note on my side so I can remember them. Usually I do. But anyway, beauty friends, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This is, I think, my last class for 2024. So I just want to take a moment to thank everybody on the Michaels team, everybody on the production team that Michaels works with, who does such an amazing job as moderators in the classes. Thank you to all the beauty friends for hanging out with me hanging out with me last year. Have a wonderful holiday season, a happy new year, and I'll see you in 2025. And until then, happy beading.